let's dig into your story and your book. I love the title, Limitless. Did the title come easy? Did it finally hit you at one point? How did you narrow down your great story with a great title?
You know, that's honestly a really interesting question, and one that I will say, having now titled a book, I will never look at a single book title the same because there's so much that goes into it that you're thinking about. And to your point, like you get one or two words, a quick, snappy phrase to put your entire thought, or in this case, journey, kind of into it. Um, for me, Limitless came really natural because one of the things I talk a lot about is redefining limitations. And I think as an individual with a disability, more often than not, society sees limits when they see a disability that is visible on the outside eye, for example, a wheelchair in my situation. And I really loved the notion of how do we all find our own limitless potential within? Because we all have it, right? And so for me, my journey has its unique ups and downs, but at the end of the day, we all have a story. And I think there's something really beautiful about when we find the strength to honor our truth. That's really what Limitless comes down to. It's not about biggest, fastest, strongest, all of that. It's more of a sense of being and just truly understanding who you are to your core.
These first two questions might seem cheesy, but as a former writer in a whole different life, the lead was huge. I didn't have to do a lot of my headlines or my titles, but I definitely have an appreciation for them. So the title was huge. And when I first opened your book, the first thing that kind of hit me was I love the name of your chapters. So you can change the world, but you can't do it alone. Face your fears, move forward, limitless. Healing is not chronological. I love that. Rise above, find your why, redefine your limitations, be willing to fail. Another great one, love perseveres, embrace your comeback. Like you were able to get these quick snapshots and then dig into these big themes in each of your chapters. How the heck did you storyboard these chapters? How did you get them such concise ways that grab a reader's attention, like my attention? How did you get these great chapter titles going?
Yeah, it was really fun going through that process and figuring out how did I want to most authentically tell this story. And so I started journaling right after I was paralyzed in 2008. I mean, my earliest journal that I found was 2 days after my injury. And so when it came time to write Limitless, I sat down with those journals. I pulled them out from the bin that's under the guest room bed at our home, and I started going through them, and they're all flagged up and kind of marked. And what we really started doing was figuring out what are the common themes of things that I was trying to come to terms with during different periods of my own journey. And when we started, I really wanted Limitless to be authentic to what I was going through in those moments, not how I perceive it, hindsight 2020. And so those chapter titles actually came as themes, if you will, right? Like embrace your comeback. That phrase alone tells its own story and can apply to all of us. And so in doing that, really honestly, my journals really led the way, and they kind of made it very obvious healing is not chronological. And gosh, those journals around that time, I mean, it was something I was really trying to understand and I was kind of battling with. And so I think that for me, when I look at the chapter titles, is where they become so meaningful because they're literally pulled from the journey of my own journals as I documented it, as I kind of moved through those processes myself.
And then with your journal, I really appreciate it and I really respect that you shared a journal, different parts of journals in your book, and that you were able to be raw and open and honest and vulnerable. Where does that courage come from?
Ooh. You know, I've really found that our ability to be vulnerable is ultimately what makes us all the most connectable. And sharing your journals is tough. It's scary. And I'll be honest, when we were
Because it's an
writing it,
intimate part of you.
oh my goodness, it is. And it was one of those things where I was like, we're not editing it. If there's a typo, it's staying. We're just letting them be what they were, the way they were written. And that's a little scary. But I will say I've been speaking now for the past, gosh, 8 years, and I've shared journals publicly in some of my keynotes. And so it's not the first time I've shared my journals, but it still is. It's a very intimate part of you. But I think for me, everything that was challenging in the writing process of Limitless, I kept going back to my why. And my why was what grounded me when I was nervous to tell a story, when it felt really vulnerable and I was trying to tap into that courage. And that why kind of led me through, what do I share? How do I share it? How do I keep the purpose of what I hope Limitless can be for others at the forefront of the writing process? And doing that, I think, gave me a lot of courage because there's meaning to it. There's a purpose. I'm not just doing it to do it, if you will.
Mhm. One of my favorite chapters, and it got my attention because as a Christian, I'm like, oh, good overcomes. And you start talking about the 2019 World Para Swimming Championships, and the title came from your mom. And she leaned on the wisdom or the phrase, I forget how you word that, that good overcomes. And you've been told that, you say, as long as you can remember.
Yeah.
What can you share with listeners or people watching this on YouTube about your mom's wisdom of good overcomes without giving away too much of the book? Just give them a little tease, I
Yeah.
guess.
It's such a powerful phrase, but also so simple sometimes. And I think that's what I love about it is you can really dive into what does good overcome truly mean, but you can also just hear good overcomes. And it's like that quick, yep, that reminder. And so for us, that's always been kind of our thing, right? Mom tells it to us in not this just like kind of glossy way of, everything's sunshine and rainbows, because life gets hard. We all know that. Gosh, especially after 2020, we all know that. And so I think that where I find the power in good overcomes is it's really that simple of just holding on to our faith, whatever that faith is rooted in, and understanding that in this moment in time, whatever's going on does not define what is to become in our lifetime. And if we can somehow hold on to that on those really hard days, those really challenging days that feel like they tax us for everything we have, or seasons, if you will, then we can get a little bit more strength each day to find that there's meaning within all of this. And so, Good Overcomes has been a really powerful reminder for me in my life.
I like that. I like that the book, by and large, I think most people who read this will be adults. I teach grade 5, so in Canada, grade 5, but 5th grade for you guys. I'm going to share this chat or at least parts of it with my grade 5 students. And I think the book deals with some heavy stuff, but even a 10-year-old will appreciate this. And the Face Your Fears chapter really resonated with me as I was reading, because I thought, my students are really going to get something out of that. They deal with a bunch of different stuff. And the part that really stuck with me in that chapter was you wrote, I decided that spring that my paralysis was not going to be my paralyzing factor. It's a great line. It's brilliant. It was not going to be the moment that stopped me from chasing goals. And it certainly wasn't going to be the moment that stopped me from living. Now, there's some great wisdom in there. What would you say to a grade 5 student or an elementary student who's going through some really tough stuff? And there's some fears in their life, there's some adversity. How can that chapter help them? And or what would you say to a younger student who's reading your book?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I think the concept of face your fears, it's universal. It's not just for adults, it's also universal for children. And I think where that comes in is, especially I think back to my 5th grade self, right? Like you're old enough that you start having dreams and goals, and you're old enough to understand the weight of real life things that are going on around you. But you're also young enough that you should be able to maintain some innocence in your life and still just be a kid. And that's hard when you're kind of like at that point. And I think when it comes down to face your fears, it's that idea that to some level you just have to allow yourself to believe in yourself enough to not let that little voice that we all get in the back of our head that tells us we're not good enough, or this isn't for us, or we're not cut out for that, or that dream's not for people like me, whatever that quote unquote people like me really means.
Yeah.
Um, and really just allowing yourself to believe in your own capabilities and your own worth. And 10-year-olds get that. I mean, 10-year-olds have athletic ambitions, they have academic ambitions, they have, maybe they're into theater or whatever it is. They're starting tryouts, they're starting to be gauged against their peers. And that's scary because with that comes the chance of failure. And I think it's really powerful at any age, but especially even if you can learn that young, to understand that failure is not something we need to fear, but rather something that we can embrace. And then ultimately, that's what makes us stronger and more resilient.
I love that your answers are setting up my next question perfectly because
I haven't
you're
seen your
in,
questions, so
no, and
sorry.
this is why it's amazing to me. So failure is a chance to grow. So is the healing process. So chapter 5, healing is not chronological. In my notes here, I have in all capital letters, huh? Question mark. And I love how you started with an excerpt from your personal journal, sorry. I think this concept is fascinating and I still can't get my head around it. Can you explain a little more to me? Because the concept is great. I don't get it though still.
Yeah, no, that's fair. For me, where it really stemmed from was, I was paralyzed at 18. And when I was injured, there was a lot of outside opinions on what I would or wouldn't be able to do in my life moving forward, how I should or shouldn't feel. And I found really early on that as an individual living in a wheelchair, unfortunately, that solicits unsolicited advice from strangers who I think truly in their being, they're trying to be kind,
They mean
but
well.
they mean well, but it doesn't always come off that way. And I think there was a lot of pressure I felt from society after my injury to feel one way or the other. If I found happiness too soon after trauma, then I was in denial. If I was sad too long after the trauma took place, then I was living in the past. And it was this constant pressure to feel like I had to heal on this timeline. Like after the first year, I should feel this way. But in this first 6 months, I certainly shouldn't be happy about anything because I should still be sad about the fact that I've been paralyzed. And we're more complex than that. We don't only face one emotion at a time. We can face the extremes simultaneously. We can experience the depths of heartbreak, but also be in the moments that bring like love and light into our life. And it's not one or the other. And so for me, healing is not chronological really was honestly my aha moment going into the London 2012 games. I was really struggling with the fact that here at that point in my life, I was a 15-time world record holder and I'd only been paralyzed 3.5 years. I was winning an ESPN ESPY award. I mean, like I had all these things to be so happy about that I almost felt guilty for still being sad some days about what living in a wheelchair meant for my life. Because yeah, I've embraced it. And honestly, I've done way more on four wheels than all I've ever done on 2 feet. But that doesn't mean that some days when you hit a curb that's not accessible or somebody makes just a ridiculous comment in the grocery store, that it doesn't sting and that it doesn't hurt. And it took me a while to realize that it's okay to still grieve what happened on January 21st, 2008, no matter how much time passes. And it's also okay to be happy and find love and joy and success in life, regardless of the fact that it was rooted in trauma. And I think that's really where healing is not chronological comes in, is just kind of that permission for us to feel and grieve on our timeline, not some predetermined timeline that society has put in place telling us how we should feel about a certain situation.
Mallory, thank you for your time. We're going to wrap on these two final quick questions. I'm not sure if this is going to go live the week before your book comes out or the week of or that. So if you could let listeners know the official release date where
Yes.
they can get a copy of the book. And then this is a story that's going to resonate with so many people. Do you prefer LinkedIn? Do you have Twitter? Do you have Instagram? Where can readers connect with you and just connect with you after reading the book?
Yeah. So the book officially comes out on March 2nd. We are beyond excited. It'll be in bookstores nationwide in the US, but you can also go to MalloryWeggemannBook.com to find all the different retailers. And goodness, I love connecting with others. I use Instagram as my main platform. I'm active on them all, but I would say I'm the most active on Instagram. And it's such a great way to touch base and connect because at the end of the day, we all have incredible stories. And I think it's such a beautiful way to start sharing those with each other and support a community.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was awesome.